There's a kind of invisibility that comes not from being unseen, but from being looked through, as if you're made of glass, and the world finds what's behind you more interesting than what you are. Maya had lived with that invisibility her entire life. She wasn't ignored because she was forgettable, but because she'd learned early to make herself small, to take up less space, to exist in the margins where no one would notice if she disappeared. She had convinced herself that safety lived in shadows, that being overlooked was better than being rejected. Until one rain-soaked evening, when she collided with a man who saw her, really saw her, and refused to let her fade back into the background. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from, and if you feel it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. Your support makes all the difference. The rain came without warning, the way spring storms do in the city, transforming the late afternoon from pleasant warmth to a deluge in minutes. Maya had been walking home from the small bookshop where she worked, lost in thought as usual, her canvas bag heavy with the novel she was reading, and the sketchbook she never showed anyone. She'd always loved the walk from the vintage bookstore on 7th Street to her tiny studio apartment, 12 blocks away. It gave her time to breathe, to exist without performance, to simply be. But the rain changed everything. Within seconds, she was soaked through, her thin cardigan clinging to her frame, her long dark hair plastered to her face and neck. She started running, not because she was vain about her appearance, but because her bag held her sketchbook, and the thought of her drawings bleeding into watercolor chaos made her chest tight with panic. Those sketches were the only place she let herself be bold, be visible, be more than the quiet girl no one remembered. She wasn't watching where she was going. That was her first mistake. Her second was turning the corner at 5th and Morrison at full speed, head down against the rain, completely blind to what was coming. She hit him like a wall, not a metaphorical wall, an actual wall of solid muscle and expensive fabric that didn't give an inch when she crashed into it. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs and sent her stumbling backward. She would have fallen, would have ended up on the wet pavement with her dignity scattered around her, but hands caught her, strong hands that gripped her upper arms and steadied her with a firmness that felt both commanding and strangely gentle. "Sorry," she gasped, still not looking up, her automatic apology already leaving her lips. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't. I didn't see." She tried to pull away, to disappear back into the rain, but the hands didn't release her. Not roughly, not demandingly, but with a certainty that made her finally raise her eyes. And that's when the world tilted. He was tall, easily 6'2", with dark hair that the rain had pushed back from his face, revealing sharp cheekbones and a jawline that looked carved from marble. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent, though the rain had darkened it several shades. But it wasn't his height, or his looks, or his obvious wealth that made her breath catch. It was his eyes. Gray, like storm clouds, like smoke, like something fierce and hungry and searching. And they were looking at her. Not through her. At her. She felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing, like he was cataloging every detail of her face, every raindrop caught in her eyelashes, every freckle the water had revealed. "Are you hurt?" His voice was deep, textured, with an edge of command that suggested he was used to being obeyed. Maya shook her head, still caught in those eyes, unable to form words. The rain pounded around them, creating a curtain that made everything beyond their small space feel distant and unreal. His hands were still on her arms. She could feel the heat of them through her wet cardigan, could feel the strength in his fingers. "You need to look where you're going," he said. But there was no real anger in it. Just something that might have been amusement, or might have been something darker. Something that made her pulse jump. "I know," she managed, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I'm sorry, I should." She tried to step back again, and this time, he let her go. But slowly, his hands sliding down her arms in a way that felt deliberate, that left trails of heat on her cold skin. She should have left then, should have mumbled another apology, and disappeared into the rain like she always did, like she was supposed to. But something made her pause. Maybe it was the way he was still looking at her, as if he'd never seen anything quite like her before. Maybe it was the rain creating a temporary world where normal rules didn't apply. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in her 26 years, someone was seeing her as more than background noise. "What's your name?" he asked, and the question felt weighted with meaning she couldn't identify. "Maya," she said, and her name had never sounded like that before, like something worth knowing, worth remembering. His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. "Maya," he repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "I'm Ethan. Ethan Cross." The name meant nothing to her. But she would learn later that it meant everything to everyone else. That Ethan Cross was the CEO of Cross Industries. That he was on the cover of business magazines. That he was known for being brilliant and ruthless and completely untouchable. But in that moment, in the rain, he was just a man, looking at her like she mattered. They stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The rain continuing its assault, the city moving around them in blurred shapes and muted colors. Then, Ethan did something Maya would replay in her mind 1,000 times afterward. He reached up, slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted, and brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. His fingers grazed her cheek, just the lightest touch, but it sent electricity down her spine. "You're shaking," he observed. From the cold, or from his touch, she couldn't say. She opened her mouth to respond, to say something, anything, but before she could, someone called his name from behind them. A man in a suit, holding an umbrella, looking impatient. "Mr. Cross, your meeting." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away from Maya. "Go inside," he told her, his voice dropping lower. "Get warm." And then, before she could process what was happening, he leaned down and his lips brushed against her forehead, so briefly she might have imagined it, if not for the burning sensation it left behind. The gesture was tender and possessive all at once, completely inappropriate for strangers, and it made her knees weak. When he pulled back, his eyes held hers for one more moment. "I'll find you, Maya," he said, and it sounded like a promise and a warning combined. Then he was gone, striding away into the rain, leaving her standing there soaked and shaking and utterly confused about what had just happened. Maya didn't tell anyone about the encounter. How could she explain something she didn't understand herself? That a stranger had touched her face in the rain and left her feeling like her entire world had shifted on its axis? That his eyes had seen something in her she didn't know existed? That his words, "I'll find you," played on repeat in her mind like a song she couldn't stop humming? So she went back to her life, to the bookshop where she shelved novels and recommended titles to customers who barely glanced at her face, to her studio apartment where she painted and sketched, and let herself be bold only in private. She went back to being invisible. Except she didn't feel invisible anymore. She felt marked. The bookshop was Maya's sanctuary, a place that smelled of old paper and possibility, where the owner, Mrs. Chen, a kind woman in her 70s, let Maya arrange the displays and choose which classics to feature in the window. It was a small shop, tucked between a coffee house and a vintage clothing store. The kind of place that survived on loyal customers and the occasional tourist who stumbled in looking for something authentic. Maya had worked there for 3 years, ever since she'd moved to the city with nothing but a degree in art history and dreams she was too afraid to pursue. 3 days after the rain, Maya was restocking the poetry section when the bell above the door chimed. She didn't look up immediately. She was debating whether to shelve Mary Oliver alphabetically or chronologically when she felt it. That same sensation from the rain, like the air pressure had changed, like something electric had entered the room. Her hand stilled on the book she was holding. Slowly, she turned. Ethan Cross stood just inside the doorway, looking impossibly out of place in his tailored navy suit among the worn wooden shelves and faded carpets. But he wasn't looking at the shop. He was looking at her, and he was smiling. A slow, satisfied smile that made her heart hammer against her ribs. "I told you I'd find you," he said. Maya's mouth went dry. "How did you?" She started, but couldn't finish. How had he found her? She hadn't told him where she worked, hadn't told him anything except her first name. "You dropped this," Ethan said, holding up her sketchbook, the one she'd been carrying in her bag that day in the rain. The one she thought she'd lost, that she'd mourned for 3 days, that contained every private thought and feeling she'd never dared to speak aloud. Her blood went cold. "You looked through it," she said, and it wasn't a question. She could see the answer in his eyes. He crossed the space between them with long, confident strides. Maya found herself backing up until her spine hit the bookshelf behind her. Ethan stopped close, closer than a stranger should stand, and held out the sketchbook. "I did," he admitted, no apology in his voice. His eyes were darker today, more intense. "And now I understand." "Understand what?" Maya whispered, taking the sketchbook with trembling hands. "Why you try to make yourself invisible," he said softly. "Because you're afraid of how much light you carry. You think if people really see you, really see the way you view the world, it will be too much. So you hide. You make yourself small. You let everyone look through you like glass." Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. He'd seen her sketches, the bold strokes and wild colors, the way she drew the city not as it was, but as it felt, all emotion and energy and life. He'd seen what she never showed anyone. "You had no right," she managed, clutching the sketchbook to her chest like armor. "You're right," Ethan agreed. "I didn't. But I'm not sorry." His hand came up to rest on the shelf beside her head, caging her in without touching her. "Because those drawings, Maya, they're extraordinary. You're extraordinary. And I've spent 3 days thinking about you, about the way you looked at me in the rain like I was something dangerous, about the way you disappeared before I could even get your last name." She could barely breathe. He was so close she could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes, could smell his cologne. Something clean and expensive that made her dizzy. "This isn't," she tried, "this isn't how things work. You don't just track someone down because you bumped into them in the rain." His smile was sharp. "I do." The certainty in those 2 words made something flutter low in her stomach. "But why?" Maya asked, genuinely confused. "I'm nobody. I'm just," she gestured vaguely at herself, at the bookshop, at her simple black dress and scuffed flats. "I'm nothing special." Ethan's expression shifted, something fierce and almost angry flashing across his features. "Don't," he said, his voice low and rough. "Don't do that. Don't diminish yourself." His other hand came up to cup her jaw, tilting her face up to his, the touch gentle but commanding. "You think I don't know what I saw in those sketches? You think I can't recognize brilliance when it's in front of me?" His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I've spent my entire life around people who perform, who pretend, who wear masks so thick they forget their own faces. But you, Maya, you're real. You're raw, and you're so busy hiding it that you don't even realize how rare that is." Her breath came in shallow gasps. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such intensity, such certainty. She didn't know whether to believe him or to run. His thumb moved to trace her lower lip, and she made a sound, small and involuntary, that made his eyes darken further. "There it is," he murmured. "That's what I've been thinking about. The way you respond to me, even when you're trying not to. The way your body knows something your mind won't admit yet." "Maya, Mrs. Chen's voice called from the back office. "Can you help me with the inventory?" The spell broke. Ethan stepped back, giving her space, but his eyes never left hers. "I should go," Maya said, but she couldn't move. "Not yet," Ethan said. "Have dinner with me. Tonight." It wasn't really a question. Everything in Maya screamed that this was dangerous, that men like Ethan Cross didn't date girls like her, that she should say no, should protect herself, should stay invisible where it was safe. But another part of her, the part that drew wild, bold pictures in private, the part she'd been suppressing for years, whispered yes. She saw something shift in Ethan's expression when she said it. Something predatory and satisfied. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card, pressing it into her hand. "My driver will pick you up at 7. Your address is on the back." She looked down at the card, then back at him, alarmed. "How do you know where I live?" He smiled, and it should have frightened her, but instead it sent heat pooling in her belly. "I told you, Maya. I've been thinking about you. And when I want something, I don't stop until it's mine." Maya spent the rest of the day in a state of controlled panic. What had she agreed to? Dinner with a man who tracked her down, who'd looked through her private sketches, who spoke about her like she was something to be claimed rather than someone to be known. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. But when 7 o'clock approached, and she found herself standing in front of her tiny closet, trying to decide what to wear, she knew she was going anyway. Because for the first time in her life, someone saw her. Really saw her. And that was more intoxicating than any danger. She settled on a simple emerald dress, the only nice thing she owned. Something she'd bought years ago for a gallery opening she'd been too afraid to attend. It had a modest neckline, but hugged her curves in a way that made her feel exposed and powerful at the same time. She left her dark hair down in loose waves, applied minimal makeup, and tried not to think about the fact that she was getting ready for a man who'd somehow obtained her address without her permission. At exactly 7 o'clock, her phone buzzed. "Your car has arrived." She looked out the window of her second-floor apartment and saw the sleek black sedan idling at the curb, looking absurdly out of place on her shabby street. This was insane. She should cancel, should text back that she'd changed her mind, should stay home where things made sense. Instead, she grabbed her small purse and headed downstairs. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, opened the door for her without comment. The interior of the car was all leather and dark wood, more luxurious than anywhere Maya had ever been. As they pulled away from the curb, she realized she had no idea where they were going. She should have asked. She should have demanded details. Should have taken control of at least some aspect of this situation. But she'd said yes to Ethan Cross without question, as if his certainty was contagious, as if his will could override her own self-preservation. The drive took 20 minutes, weaving through evening traffic until they reached a part of the city Maya rarely ventured into, where buildings were tall and made of glass and steel, where money whispered rather than shouted. The car pulled up in front of a restaurant that had no sign, just a discreet doorway with a single attendant. This was the kind of place you needed reservations months in advance, where a single meal cost more than Maya made in a week. The driver opened her door, and suddenly Ethan was there, appearing as if he'd been waiting, watching for her arrival. He wore a black suit tonight, with a crisp white shirt open at the collar, no tie, and he looked devastating. But it was his expression when he saw her that made Maya's breath catch. His eyes traveled over her slowly, deliberately, with an appreciation that felt almost tactile. "You're beautiful," he said, and the way he said it, with that rough edge to his voice, made it sound like both a compliment and a confession. He offered his arm. Maya hesitated only a second before taking it, feeling the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric. He led her inside to a private room, because of course it was a private room, where a table was set for two, with candles and wine, and a view of the city lights spreading out like scattered diamonds. "This is too much," Maya said as he pulled out her chair. "For a first date. For any date. For someone like her." Ethan sat across from her, his eyes holding hers across the candlelight. "There's no such thing as too much when it comes to you, Maya." She didn't know how to respond to that, didn't know how to exist in this world he'd pulled her into. A server appeared with wine, expensive and red, and Ethan ordered for both of them without looking at a menu, his attention never wavering from her face. "Tell me about your art," he said once they were alone again. "Why do you hide it?" The question was direct, almost aggressive in its honesty. Maya took a sip of wine, needing the courage. "I don't hide it," she started. But he cut her off with a look. "Yes, you do. You work in a bookshop. You live alone. You've never shown your work in a gallery. I know because I checked. You have a degree from an excellent art program, but you've done nothing with it." Why? The fact that he'd researched her should have been alarming. Instead, it made something warm unfurl in her chest. "Because people don't want to see the world the way I see it," she said quietly. "They want pretty pictures, safe pictures, things that match their furniture. What I create is," she searched for the word, "too much, too intense, too emotional, too real." Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "That's exactly why people need to see it." His voice was firm, almost angry on her behalf. "The world is full of safe art, Maya. Comfortable art that challenges nothing and reveals nothing. But your work, it makes people feel. It strips away the performance and shows truth. That's valuable. That's rare." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. She'd never had anyone defend her art before, never had anyone even see it, except that one professor in college who told her she was talented but needed to be more commercial. "You don't understand," she said. "I've tried. I submitted to galleries, applied for shows. I was rejected everywhere. So I stopped trying. Stopped believing I had anything worth sharing." Ethan's jaw tightened. Then they were fools. His hand reached across the table to cover hers, and his touch sent electricity up her arm. "But that's going to change. I'm going to make sure the right people see your work. I'm going to know." Maya pulled her hand back. "I don't want your charity. I don't want to be your project." His eyes flashed with something dangerous. "Is that what you think this is? Charity?" He stood moving around the table with predatory grace, and suddenly he was beside her chair, one hand on the armrest, caging her in. "Let me be very clear, Maya. I don't do charity. I don't waste my time on projects that don't interest me. And what I want from you has nothing to do with pity." Her heart was racing. "What do you want from me?" "Everything," he said simply. His hand came up to cup her face, tilting it up to his. I want you to stop hiding. I want you to show the world what you're capable of. I want you to take up space instead of apologizing for existing. His thumb traced her lower lip, and she shivered. And I want you to admit that this thing between us, this pull, isn't one-sided, that you feel it too. She did. God help her, she did. From the moment they'd collided in the rain, she'd felt tethered to him in a way that defied logic. But admitting it felt like stepping off a cliff into nothing. I barely know you, she whispered. Then let me change that, Ethan said, and his mouth was so close to hers she could feel his breath. Let me show you who I am. Let me see who you really are when you stop performing invisibility. The food arrived then, forcing him to step back, but the tension between them remained thick and charged throughout the meal. They talked, and Maya found herself opening up in ways she never did, telling him about growing up in a small town where dreams were considered impractical, about moving to the city with nothing, about the fear that had kept her small for so long. Ethan listened with an intensity that made her feel like every word mattered, like he was cataloging everything about her for future reference. When the meal ended, Ethan didn't immediately call for his car. Instead, he stood and offered his hand. Walk with me. It wasn't a question, but Maya took his hand anyway, letting him lead her out into the cool evening air. They walked along the river, where the city lights reflected on the dark water like liquid gold, where couples strolled and joggers passed, and life hummed with quiet energy. Ethan kept her hand in his thumb drawing idle circles on her palm that sent shivers up her arm. Tell me about your family, Maya said, wanting to shift the focus from herself. Ethan's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Not much to tell. My father built Cross Industries from nothing, and when he died 5 years ago, I inherited it. No siblings? An only child. Like you. How did you know I'm an only child? Maya asked. I told you, he said, glancing at her with that slight smile. When I'm interested in something, I'm thorough. That should have bothered her more than it did. Instead, she found herself squeezing his hand. What happened to your mother? She left when I was 8, Ethan said, his voice carefully neutral. Decided being a wife and mother wasn't fulfilling enough. Last I heard, she was living in Paris with husband number 4. Maya's heart ached for the boy he must have been. I'm sorry. Don't be, Ethan said. It taught me an important lesson early. People leave. People disappoint. The only person you can truly rely on is yourself. That's lonely, Maya said softly. He stopped walking and turned to face her, his hands coming up to frame her face. It was, he admitted. Until 3 days ago, when I crashed into a woman in the rain who looked at me like I was real, not just a name or a bank account or a means to an end. You looked at me like you saw a person, Maya. Do you know how rare that is? She didn't know what to say to that, so she did the only thing that made sense. She rose up on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't planned. Wasn't calculated. It just happened, as natural as breathing. For a half second, Ethan went completely still, as if shocked. Then he made a sound low in his throat and took control of the kiss, one hand sliding into her hair, the other gripping her waist and pulling her flush against him. The kiss was nothing like the gentle brush of his lips on her forehead in the rain. This was consuming, demanding, a claiming that left no room for doubt about what he wanted. His mouth moved over hers with a skill that made her knees weak, his tongue sliding against hers in a rhythm that promised so much more. Maya had been kissed before, but never like this. Never with this intensity that made her feel like she was drowning and being saved at the same time. When he finally pulled back, They were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against hers, his hands still holding her close. That was, she started, but couldn't finish. Inevitable, Ethan supplied. His voice was rough, strained. From the moment I saw you in the rain, this was inevitable. He kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense. Come home with me, he murmured against her lips. Maya's eyes flew open. She stepped back, putting space between them, her mind racing. I can't, she said. It's too fast, too much. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he nodded. You're right, I'm pushing too hard. He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated with himself. It's just, you make me lose control, Maya. You make me want to skip all the careful steps and just... He shook his head. But I won't. I'll wait, however long it takes. The fact that he was willing to wait made Maya want to say yes even more, which was probably dangerous. Can I see you again? She asked instead. Tomorrow, Ethan said immediately. And the day after. And the day after that. He pulled her back into his arms, gentler now. I told you, Maya. When I want something, I don't stop until it's mine. And I want you. The next 3 weeks were a blur of intensity. Ethan pursued Maya with single-minded focus, showing up at the bookshop during her lunch break, sending flowers to her apartment, taking her to dinners and walks, and a dozen other places that slowly built a foundation between them. But he also kept his word. He didn't push her physically beyond heated kisses that left them both frustrated and wanting more. Instead, he pushed her in other ways. He brought gallery owners to the bookshop to accidentally see her sketches. He commissioned a piece from her for his office. He talked about her art with such conviction that Maya started to believe in it again herself. And slowly, carefully, she began to let him see all of her. The real her. Not the invisible girl, but the bold, passionate artist who'd been hiding for so long. But there were moments when she caught glimpses of something darker in Ethan. Something possessive and intense that should have frightened her. The way his jaw would tighten when other men looked at her. The way he'd drape his jacket over her shoulders in restaurants like he was marking territory. The way he'd say mine under his breath when he kissed her, as if he was claiming something that had always belonged to him. Maya told herself it was just intensity, just passion, just the way powerful men loved. She ignored the small voice that whispered she was getting in too deep, that she didn't really know this man, that his certainty felt more like control than devotion. Because being with Ethan felt like finally being seen, finally being enough, finally mattering to someone. And Maya had spent so long being invisible that the light of his attention was blinding. Everything changed on a Wednesday evening in late spring. Maya had been working on a commission, one of the pieces Ethan had arranged through a contact at a prominent gallery. She'd been so focused on the canvas that she'd lost track of time, and when she finally checked her phone, she saw 3 missed calls from Ethan and a text. Where are you? She called him back immediately. Sorry, I was painting. I lost track of time. His voice was tight. I was worried. You weren't at your apartment. I came by to surprise you. The casual way he said it, like it was normal to show up unannounced, made something uncomfortable shift in Maya's chest. I'm at the community art studio, she explained. The one on Maple Street. I rent space here sometimes when I need more room. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm coming there. Before she could respond, he'd hung up. Ethan arrived 20 minutes later, and Maya knew immediately something was wrong. His expression was hard, controlled, the way it got when he was angry but trying not to show it. He looked around the studio, taking in the space she shared with 3 other artists, the paint-splattered floors, the industrial lighting, the worn furniture. This is where you've been spending your evenings? he asked. When I'm working on bigger pieces, yes, Maya said carefully. Ethan, what's wrong? He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her take a step back. What's wrong is that I've been calling you for hours, imagining all the things that could have happened to you, and you were here. Alone. In a neighborhood that's not safe, in a building with no security, with people I don't know and haven't vetted. His voice was rising slightly. Do you have any idea how that made me feel? Maya's own temper sparked. I'm 26 years old, Ethan. I don't need to check in with you every hour. And I've been coming to this studio for 2 years, without incident. It's perfectly safe. It's not safe, he bit out. And you should have told me you were going to be here. I would have, Maya said, fighting to keep her voice calm, if I'd known you were planning to show up at my apartment unannounced. Ethan's jaw clenched. I wanted to surprise you. Take you to dinner, show you something I've been working on. Instead, I spent an hour worried sick because you weren't where I expected you to be. Maybe that's the problem, Maya said, her voice sharper now. Your expectations. I'm not a possession you can keep track of, Ethan. I'm a person with my own life, my own space, my own time. The moment the words left her mouth, she saw something flash in his eyes. Something dark and wounded and angry all at once. Is that what you think? He asked, his voice dangerously soft. That I see you as a possession? I think, Maya said, choosing her words carefully, that sometimes you love me like you're trying to own me. Like I'm something you've acquired rather than someone you're choosing to be with. The silence that followed was heavy, charged. Ethan stood very still, and Maya could see him physically working to control whatever he was feeling. Then he spoke, and his voice was raw. My mother left without warning. One day she was there, the next she was gone. No explanation, no goodbye, just a note, saying she needed more than we could give her. I was 8 years old, Maya. 8, and I came home from school to find half the house empty and my father drunk in his study. Do you know what that does to a child? To never feel secure? To always be waiting for people to leave? Maya's anger dissolved into aching sympathy. Ethan, I'm sorry. I didn't. I know you didn't. He cut her off. Because I don't talk about this. I don't talk about the fact that every relationship I've ever had has ended because I couldn't let go. Couldn't trust. Couldn't stop trying to control every variable to make sure no one else walked away. He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. And then I met you. And you were different. You saw me. Really saw me. And for the first time I thought, maybe I could have something real. Something that wouldn't slip through my fingers if I wasn't vigilant every second. Maya's throat was tight. So when you didn't answer your phone, Ethan continued, when you weren't where I thought you'd be, I spiraled. Because that's what I do, Maya. I catastrophize. I imagine worst-case scenarios. I try to control everything, because control is the only thing that's ever made me feel safe. He looked at her, and his eyes were vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I know it's not fair to you. I know I'm intense and demanding, and probably more than you signed up for. But I don't know how to be any other way. Maya crossed the space between them and took his face in her hands. Listen to me, she said firmly. I'm not your mother. I'm not going to disappear without warning. But Ethan, you have to let me breathe. You have to trust that I can go somewhere without checking in. That I can have parts of my life that aren't centered around you. And it doesn't mean I'm leaving. His hands came up to cover hers. I'm trying, he said. I swear I'm trying. But when it comes to you, I don't seem to have the control I have over everything else in my life. You make me crazy, Maya. You make me feel things I've spent years avoiding. I know, she said softly, because you make me feel the same way. But we have to find a balance, Ethan. This intensity, it's beautiful, but it's also frightening sometimes. You're frightening sometimes. The admission seemed to hit him hard. She watched him physically flinch, watched pain cross his features. I never want you to be afraid of me, he said. Never, Maya. If I'm making you feel that way, you need to tell me. I need to fix it. That's just it, Maya said. You can't fix everything. You can't control everything. Sometimes you just have to trust. Trust that I care about you, that I'm not going anywhere, that we're building something together instead of you building something around me. Can you do that? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I'll try, he murmured into her hair. I can't promise I'll be perfect at it, but I'll try. For you, I'll try. They stood like that for several minutes, holding each other in the middle of the paint-splattered studio. Maya could feel Ethan's heart beating against her cheek, could feel the tension slowly leaving his body. This was the moment, she realized, where they either found a way forward or let the intensity consume them. She chose forward. Show me, she said, pulling back to look at him. Whatever you wanted to show me tonight. Let's start again. Ethan's expression softened. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then finally her lips, soft and sweet and full of promise. Okay, he agreed. Let's start again. The thing Ethan wanted to show Maya turned out to be a gallery space. Not just any gallery, but a beautiful, light-filled space in the heart of the arts district, with exposed brick walls and high ceilings, and exactly the kind of atmosphere where Maya had always dreamed her work might hang. I bought it, Ethan said as they stood in the empty space, his voice careful. 3 weeks ago, right after I saw your sketches. I've been having it renovated, getting it ready. He turned to face her. I want this to be yours, Maya, your gallery. A place where you can show your work, where other artists like you can show theirs. Artists who are too real, too raw, too intense for the commercial spaces that only want safe art. Maya couldn't speak. She walked through the space, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors, her mind spinning. This was too much. This was everything she'd ever wanted, and also completely overwhelming. You bought me a gallery, she finally said, and she couldn't tell if she was amazed or angry or terrified, without asking me, without discussing it with me. You just decided. Ethan's expression tightened. I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to give you the platform you deserve. This is that control thing again, Maya said, turning to face him. You see a problem, and you throw money at it. You see what you think I need, and you just make it happen, without considering whether I want it to happen this way. I do want it, Ethan said, frustration creeping into his voice. You're incredibly talented, Maya, but you're also incredibly stubborn about accepting help. So yes, I made an executive decision. I used my resources to create an opportunity for you. How is that wrong? Because it's not your decision to make. Maya's voice rose. Because maybe I wanted to earn this on my own, to know that I succeeded because of my work, not because a billionaire boyfriend handed me a gallery like it was nothing. The words hung between them, sharp and cutting. Ethan's face went cold. Is that what you think? That this is about me being your boyfriend? That I'm doing this to, what, buy your affection? Keep you dependent on me? No, Maya said, but her voice was less certain now. I think you're doing this because you care about me. But Ethan, don't you see? This doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like you're trying to shape my life into what you think it should be. It feels like control. Ethan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured. Careful. You're right. He walked to one of the large windows overlooking the street. I am trying to control things. It's what I do, Maya. It's how I've survived, how I've succeeded. I see a problem, and I fix it. I see potential, and I invest in it. I see something I want, and I make it happen. But with you, it's different. With you, I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to protect you from a world that doesn't appreciate what you have to offer. That's not your job, Maya said quietly. My job is to figure out how to navigate that world myself. Your job is to support me while I do it, not to remove all the obstacles before I even know they're there. Ethan turned back to face her. What if I can't do that? What if seeing you struggle, seeing you doubt yourself, seeing the world overlook you, what if that's harder for me than just fixing it? Then we have a problem, Maya said, and her heart was breaking as she said it. Because we want different things. You want someone you can take care of, someone you can solve like a business problem. But I need someone who can sit with me in the uncertainty, who can let me fail and succeed on my own terms, who can be a partner instead of a protector. The silence that followed felt crushing. Maya watched emotions play across Ethan's face, anger and pain and something that looked like fear. Finally, he spoke. I don't know if I can be that person, he admitted. I don't know if I know how. Then we need to stop, Maya said, and saying the words felt like tearing something vital from her chest. Because this intensity, this need to control everything about my life and my career, it's not sustainable. It's not healthy. And as much as she had to stop, had to breathe past the tightness in her throat. As much as I care about you, I can't lose myself in the process of being with you. Ethan crossed the space between them in 3 long strides. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Don't, he said, and his voice was raw. Don't end this, Maya. Give me a chance to figure it out. Give me a chance to be better. I don't know if you can be better, Maya said, honestly. I think this is who you are, Ethan. Intense and controlling and overwhelming. And maybe that works for business, maybe it works for the rest of your life, but in a relationship, it suffocates. His hands came up to frame her face, and she saw something desperate in his eyes. I'll learn, he said. I'll go to therapy. I'll read books. I'll do whatever it takes. Because losing you, Maya, that's not an option. That terrifies me more than letting go of control ever could. Maya wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that he could change, that they could find a way to balance his intensity with her need for independence. But she'd seen too many relationships where one person promised to change and never did. Where love turned into resentment because fundamental incompatibilities couldn't be overcome with willpower alone. I need time, she said. I need space to think about what I want, about whether we can actually make this work. How much time? Ethan asked, and she could hear the fear in his voice. I don't know, Maya admitted. A week? 2? I just need to not be in this, she gestured between them, in this intensity all the time. I need to be able to breathe and think clearly. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Okay, he said. Space. Time. Whatever you need. But Maya, he leaned down so their foreheads were touching. I'm not giving up on this. I'm not giving up on us. She closed her eyes, memorizing the feel of him, the smell of his cologne, the sound of his breathing. Then prove it, she whispered. Prove that you can love me without trying to own me. The first 3 days without Ethan were harder than Maya expected. She'd gotten used to his constant presence, his texts throughout the day, his surprise visits, his intense focus on her. Without it, the world felt strangely muted, like someone had turned down the volume on her life. She threw herself into her work, spending long hours at the community studio, finishing the commissioned piece. But even as she painted, she found herself thinking about him, about the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd admitted his fears, about the way he'd looked at her art like it was something precious, about how being with him had made her feel visible for the first time in her life. Mrs. Chen noticed her distraction at the bookshop. "You look like someone who's lost something important," the older woman observed on the 4th day, "or someone who's trying to decide if what they found is worth keeping." Maya smiled weakly. "How do you know the difference between intense love and unhealthy obsession?" Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. "My husband, when we first met, he was very intense too," she finally said. "He wanted to know where I was all the time, wanted to be part of every aspect of my life. At first, I thought it was romantic. Then I realized it was suffocating." "How did you fix it?" Maya asked. "We didn't," Mrs. Chen said. "Not at first. I left him, told him I couldn't be with someone who treated me like a possession." Maya's heart sank. "But?" "There was a but, right?" Mrs. Chen smiled. "But he went to therapy. For 6 months he worked on himself, worked on understanding why he was so afraid of losing people, that he held them too tight. And when he came back to me, he was different. Not completely different," she clarified. "He was still intense, still passionate, still wanted to be deeply involved in my life. But he'd learned how to give me space to breathe, how to trust that love doesn't require constant vigilance." "So you think people can change?" Maya asked hopefully. "I think people can learn," Mrs. Chen said. "If they want to badly enough. If they're willing to do the hard work. The question is whether you're willing to wait while they figure it out, and whether you can trust that the person they become will be someone you still want to be with." That night, Maya sat in her apartment looking at her phone, at the messages from Ethan that she hadn't responded to. They weren't pushy or demanding. They were simple. "Thinking about you. Hope you're painting. Missing you but respecting your space." Each one made her heart ache a little more. On the 7th day, Maya's resolve cracked. She texted him, "Can we talk?" His response came immediately. "When? Where?" "Tomorrow. The park where we walked after our first dinner." He sent back a simple, "I'll be there." Maya spent the rest of the evening and all of the next morning trying to figure out what she wanted to say. She'd had her space, her time to think. And what she'd realized was that life without Ethan felt safer, but also smaller. He'd pushed her out of her comfort zone, yes, but he'd also helped her remember who she was beneath the invisibility she'd cultivated for so long. The question was whether they could find a way to keep the good while managing the intensity that threatened to overwhelm them both. She arrived at the park 10 minutes early, but Ethan was already there, sitting on the bench where they'd had their first kiss. He stood when he saw her, and Maya's breath caught. He looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well, and there was something in his expression that was different. Softer, maybe, more uncertain. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he replied, and his voice was careful. "Thank you for reaching out. I wasn't sure you would." They sat down, not quite touching, a careful distance between them. "I've been thinking," Maya started, "about what you said, about trying to be better. Have you?" She hesitated. "Have you actually done anything about it? Or was that just something you said in the moment?" Ethan pulled out his phone and showed her something. "Therapy appointments," she read. every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 2 weeks. He'd gone. He'd actually gone. I also, Ethan continued, talked to my lawyer about the gallery. I'm putting it in your name. Free and clear, no strings. If you want it, it's yours. If you don't, you can sell it, rent it, do whatever you want with it. It's not a gift with conditions anymore. It's just yours. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. Why? Because you were right, Ethan said simply. I was trying to control your career, your future, your choices. I told myself it was love, but really it was fear. Fear that if you succeeded on your own, you wouldn't need me anymore. Fear that if I wasn't essential to your happiness, you'd realize you could do better than a man who doesn't know how to love without suffocating. You're not suffocating, Maya said, reaching for his hand. You're just a lot. And I'm someone who spent years being invisible. So being with you is like going from darkness to blinding light. It's overwhelming, but it's also, she squeezed his hand, it's also the most alive I've ever felt. Ethan's expression was raw. I don't know if I can be less intense, Maya. I don't know if I can stop wanting to be involved in every part of your life. But I'm learning to ask instead of assume. Learning to support instead of solve. Learning that letting you struggle sometimes is actually more loving than removing every obstacle in your path. That's all I'm asking for, Maya said. For you to try. For you to trust me enough to let me make my own mistakes and my own successes. For you to be my partner instead of my manager. Can you do that? I'm doing it, Ethan said. It's hard, and I mess up, and my therapist says I have a long way to go. But Maya, I'm doing it because losing you is not an option, because you're the only person who's ever made me want to be better, instead of just more successful. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close, but not tight, not possessive, just present. We're going to have to figure this out as we go, she said. There's going to be moments where you push too hard, and I push back. We're going to fight. We're going to frustrate each other. I know, Ethan agreed. But Maya, I'd rather fight with you than be peaceful with anyone else. She lifted her head to look at him. That might be the most honest thing you've ever said to me. He smiled, and it was real, not the controlled expression he usually wore. I'm learning that honesty is more important than control. They started again, slowly this time. Ethan kept his therapy appointments, and Maya started showing him her work in progress paintings, without waiting for them to be perfect. They established boundaries, clear agreements about what was supportive and what was controlling. There were still moments of friction, still times when Ethan's intensity flared, and Maya had to firmly remind him to step back. But there were also moments of profound connection, times when his passion for her felt like being wrapped in warmth, rather than being consumed by fire. And slowly, carefully, Maya began to trust that they were building something sustainable. 3 months after their confrontation in the gallery space, Maya decided to have her first show, not in the gallery Ethan had bought her, which still sat empty, while she figured out what she wanted to do with it, but in the community studio where she'd been working for years. It was a small venue, nothing fancy, just her work hung on exposed brick walls with cheap wine, and her fellow artists supporting her. She didn't tell Ethan until 2 days before the opening. I'm having a show, she said over dinner at her apartment. Saturday night. It's small, nothing like what you're probably used to, but it's mine. I did it myself. His eyes lit up with pride. That's incredible, Maya. Can I come? She nodded. But you have to come as my boyfriend, not as Ethan Cross, the CEO. No buying all my pieces to inflate my success. No networking with collectors behind my back. You just come, look at my art, and tell me what you honestly think. I can do that, he promised. Saturday night arrived with perfect spring weather. The studio was packed. More people than Maya had expected. Friends from the bookshop, other artists, regular customers who'd heard about it. And Ethan, who arrived fashionably late wearing jeans and a simple black shirt, looking relaxed in a way she rarely saw him. He moved through the space slowly, studying each piece, and Maya watched him from across the room, her heart in her throat. These were her most vulnerable works, the paintings where she'd stripped away all pretense and shown exactly how she saw the world, bold and messy and full of emotion. When he finally reached her, his eyes were intense but soft. They're extraordinary, he said quietly. They're you, completely unfiltered. This one, he gestured to a large canvas showing the city in shades of gold and shadow. This is how you see the world, isn't it? Full of hidden light, full of beauty in places other people overlook. Yes, Maya said, surprised he understood so completely. He pulled her close, uncaring that people were watching. I'm so proud of you, he murmured against her hair, and I'm so grateful you let me be here to see this. The show was a success. Maya sold 3 pieces, got interest from 2 small galleries, and more importantly, felt the validation of people connecting with her work. But the best part was watching Ethan navigate the space, being charming and supportive without being overbearing, letting her have her moment without trying to control or manage it. Afterward, when the crowd had cleared and they were helping to take down pieces, Maya's friend Sarah pulled her aside. I have to say, Sarah admitted, when you told me about him, about how intense he was, I was worried. But tonight, seeing you two together, it's different. He looks at you like you're the sun, but he's not trying to own you anymore. He's just basking in your light. That's a good metaphor, Maya said, smiling. It's taken a lot of work to get here, a lot of conversations and boundaries, and him learning to trust that I'm not going to disappear. But yeah, it's better. It's good. That night, back at Ethan's apartment, the penthouse he'd barely convinced her to visit because she still felt out of place among his wealth, they sat on his balcony, overlooking the city. The same city lights she'd painted, spread out below them like a promise. I have something for you, Ethan said. Maya groaned playfully. If it's another extravagant gift, I swear. It's not, he interrupted, pulling a small sketchbook from beside his chair. It's something I made. She took it, surprised. Ethan didn't make things. He bought them, acquired them, invested in them. But this was a sketchbook filled with his handwriting, messy and urgent, pages and pages of thoughts and feelings and observations. It's a journal, he explained, looking almost embarrassed. My therapist suggested I start writing down my thoughts when I feel the need to control things. When I want to check where you are, or solve a problem you haven't asked me to solve, I write it down instead. This is 3 months of me learning to let you be. Maya paged through it with tears in her eyes. There were entries about her, about how hard it was to watch her struggle with a difficult piece without offering advice, about the fear he felt when she went somewhere without telling him, and how he managed that fear. About the pride he felt watching her grow into her confidence. About the love he had for her that felt too big for his body sometimes. She started. But her voice broke. This is the most romantic thing anyone's ever given me, she finally managed. Ethan took her hand. You made me want to be better, Maya. You made me realize that love doesn't mean possession. It means witnessing. It means celebrating. It means sitting with discomfort so the person you love can fly. She set the journal aside and moved to straddle his lap, her hands framing his face. "I love you," she said, "and not despite your intensity, but because of it. Because you feel everything so deeply. I just needed you to feel it, without trying to control it." "I'm still learning," he said, his hands settling on her waist. "But I'm getting better." "Kiss me," Maya said. And he did, deep and slow and full of promise. The kiss turned heated, as their kisses always did, both of them having spent months building tension with careful boundaries. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like they'd finally found their balance. When Maya pulled back, Ethan's eyes were dark with want. "Stay tonight," he said, not as a demand, but as a question. Maya smiled. Yes. They moved inside slowly, hands linked, both aware that something had shifted between them. The physical tension that had simmered for months was reaching a breaking point, but this time it felt right. Not rushed, not controlled, just inevitable in the best possible way. Ethan's bedroom was simple despite the luxury of the penthouse, done in grays and whites with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the city spread below. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I need you to know something," he said. "When we do this, when you give yourself to me, I'm going to want all of you. Not to possess you, but to know you, to see every part of you." And Maya, that level of intimacy terrifies me almost as much as it excites me. Because once I have you like this, I don't know if I'll ever be able to let go. "I don't want you to let go," Maya said, stepping closer. "I just want you to hold me without crushing me. Can you do that?" He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "I can try," he promised. "But if I'm too much, if I push too hard, you tell me. You always tell me." She nodded, and then his mouth was on hers, kissing her with that intensity she'd come to crave. His hands slid into her hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss, and Maya melted against him. Everything about Ethan was consuming. The way he kissed, the way he touched, the way he made her feel like she was the center of his universe. But now, after months of learning each other, of building trust, of establishing that she could say no and he would listen, the intensity felt safe, felt right. He walked her backward toward the bed, never breaking the kiss, his hands moving to the hem of her dress. "Can I?" he asked against her lips. "Yes," Maya breathed. He lifted the dress over her head slowly, reverently, his eyes tracking every inch of skin revealed. She stood before him in just her underwear, and instead of feeling exposed, she felt powerful. Because the way Ethan looked at her, like she was art, like she was sacred, made her believe she was beautiful. "You're perfect," he said, his voice rough. His hands skimmed over her shoulders, down her arms, learning the feel of her. "Maya, tell me what you want. Tell me what you need." "I need you to be gentle," she admitted. I haven't," she took a breath. "There haven't been many people, Ethan, and none of them made me feel the way you do. So I need." "Slow," he finished for her. "You need me to go slow, to make sure you're okay with every step." She nodded, grateful he understood without her having to fully explain. "Come here," he said, pulling her onto the bed with him. They lay facing each other, and Ethan just held her for a moment, his hand stroking her hair, his eyes searching hers. "We have all night," he murmured. "We have forever. There's no rush." The tenderness in his words made Maya's chest ache. This was the Ethan she'd needed to see. The man beneath the control. The person who could be patient and gentle, even when desire was clearly burning through him. She kissed him again, deeper this time, her hands sliding under his shirt to feel the warm skin beneath. He helped her remove it, then his pants, until they were skin to skin. Nothing between them but breath and want, and the building heat. His hands explored her slowly, learning every curve, every sensitive spot that made her gasp. And when he touched her more intimately, when his fingers slid beneath fabric to find her ready and wanting, he watched her face with an intensity that stole her breath. "You're so responsive," he whispered, his fingers moving in slow circles that had her arching against him. "So perfect. Tell me how it feels, Maya. Tell me what you need." "It feels," she gasped as pleasure spiraled through her. "It feels like too much, and not enough at the same time." His smile was wicked. "Then let me give you more." He moved down her body, placing kisses along her neck, her collarbone, her breasts. When he finally settled between her thighs, Maya's heart was racing. "Ethan," she started. But he looked up at her with such reverence that the words died in her throat. "Let me worship you," he said simply. And then his mouth was on her, and Maya forgot how to breathe. He took his time, learning what made her moan, what made her hips lift toward him, what made her hands fist in his hair. And when she shattered, crying out his name, he held her through it, his arms wrapped around her thighs, his mouth gentling but not stopping until every last wave had passed. Maya pulled him up to her, kissing him deeply, tasting herself on his lips. "I want you," she said. "All of you." "Are you sure?" Ethan asked. Even though she could feel how much he wanted this, could feel the evidence of his desire pressed against her. "I'm sure," Maya said. "I trust you, Ethan." That seemed to undo something in him. He reached for protection, taking care of that quickly, and then he was positioning himself at her entrance. Slow, he promised, his forehead pressed to hers. "If it's too much, if I hurt you, you tell me and I stop. Okay?" "Okay," Maya breathed. He pushed inside slowly, and Maya gasped at the sensation. He was big, overwhelming, stretching her in a way that bordered on too much. But he stopped, let her adjust, kissed her softly until she relaxed around him. "Okay?" he asked, his voice strained with the effort of holding still. "Okay," she confirmed. "More." He moved then, slow and deep, establishing a rhythm that had Maya clinging to him, her nails digging into his shoulders. It felt incredible. Felt right. Felt like two pieces finally sliding into place. And when he whispered "I love you" against her neck, when he told her she was everything, when he made her feel cherished and desired all at once, Maya knew this was what she'd been waiting for. Not just physical intimacy, but the complete vulnerability of being fully known and fully loved despite, or maybe because of, all her flaws and fears. They made love twice more that night, each time slower and more tender than the last, learning each other's bodies with the patience of people who knew they had time. And in the quiet hours before dawn, lying tangled together with the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, Maya felt something settle in her chest. Peace. The certainty that she'd found her person, complicated and intense as he was. "I was thinking," Ethan said softly, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "About the gallery." "What about it?" Maya asked. "I think you should use it," he said. "Not because I'm pushing you, but because you're ready. Tonight, seeing you at your show, seeing how people responded to your work, I realized you're not the invisible girl anymore, Maya. You've stepped into the light. And you deserve a space that matches that." She was quiet, considering. "And if I do use it, if I open my own gallery, then I'll support you however you need," he said, financially if you want, but more importantly, I'll just show up. I'll celebrate with you when things go well, and sit with you when they don't. I'll be your partner, not your manager." "That's all I've ever wanted," Maya said, kissing his chest. "For you to trust me to build my own dreams while you stand beside me." The months that followed were transformative. Maya did open the gallery, filling it with her own work and pieces from other artists who'd been told they were too raw, too honest, too much. She called it Visible, a name that felt right for a space dedicated to artists who refused to hide anymore. The opening was a massive success, drawing collectors and critics and everyday people who were hungry for art that made them feel instead of just decorating their walls. Ethan was there, of course, but he stood in the background, letting Maya have her moment, his pride evident in every glance. And when reporters asked about their relationship, about the billionaire CEO who was dating an up-and-coming artist, Maya could honestly say they were partners, that he challenged her and supported her and loved her without trying to control her, that they were still learning, still growing, still figuring out how to balance his intensity with her need for independence. But they were doing it together. A year after that first kiss in the rain, Ethan took Maya back to the spot where they'd collided. It was raining again, a soft spring rain that felt more like a blessing than an inconvenience. "I've been thinking about what you said once," Ethan told her as they stood together under his umbrella. "About how I wanted to own you instead of love you. And I realized you were right. I was trying to control you because I was terrified of losing you. But this past year has taught me something." He turned to face her, raindrops caught in his dark hair. "Love isn't about holding tight. It's about creating a space safe enough for someone to be completely themselves, then choosing to stay in that space with them." Maya felt tears mix with rain on her cheeks. "When did you get so wise? When you loved me enough to call me on my patterns," he said. "When you refused to shrink yourself to make me comfortable. When you showed me that real love requires both people to grow, not just one person to accommodate the other's damage." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Maya's heart stopped. "I'm not asking you to be mine," Ethan said, opening the box to reveal a simple silver ring with a small diamond. "Because you were never mine to claim, but I'm asking if you'll choose me. Every day, despite my intensity and my control issues, and my fear of abandonment, will you choose to build a life with someone who sees you completely and loves you not despite your boldness, but because of it?" "Yes," Maya said through tears and laughter. "Yes, I'll choose you." He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her in the rain, the same rain that had brought them together, that had created a moment where two people collided and saw each other truly for the first time. And Maya thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, the one who tried so hard to be invisible, who thought taking up space was dangerous, who believed love meant making yourself small enough to fit someone else's expectations. That girl wouldn't recognize who she'd become. Someone bold, someone visible, someone who'd learned that the right person doesn't make you smaller. They give you room to expand into your fullest self. As they walked home through the rain, hands linked, future spreading before them like the city lights spreading across the darkness, Maya felt gratitude for every difficult moment, every fight, every time they'd had to choose growth over comfort. Because those moments had built something real, something sustainable, something big enough to hold both their intensities without anyone getting lost. Ethan stopped suddenly and pulled her close. "What?" Maya asked, smiling up at him. "Nothing," he said, but his eyes were full of everything. "I just needed a moment to appreciate this, to appreciate you." "That's very un-CEO-like of you," Maya teased. taking a moment instead of rushing to the next thing. "You're a terrible influence," Ethan said, but he was smiling. "You've taught me that sometimes the most important thing is to be present, not productive." "Good," Maya said, kissing him softly. "Keep learning." "I will," he promised. "For you, I'll never stop learning." And that, Maya realized, was what real love looked like. Not perfection, not effortless compatibility, but two people committed to growing together, to challenging each other, to creating space for both their lights to shine without dimming the other. They walked home through the rain, two people who'd learned that love wasn't about possession or control, but about witnessing and celebrating each other's becoming. And every step forward was a choice, a commitment, a promise that they would keep choosing each other, keep growing together, keep building something beautiful from the intensity they both carried. Because in the end, Maya had learned the most important truth. She wasn't too much. She was exactly enough. And Ethan had learned that loving someone didn't mean owning them. It meant creating safety for them to be fully, completely, unapologetically themselves. Together, they were learning what it meant to love big, to feel deeply, and to build a life where both people could be visible, could take up space, could shine without fear. And that was everything.